The stagecoach rattled to a halt in front of the dusty Mojave, California station, sending a cloud of desert dust billowing into the hot summer air of 1875. 22-year-old Tabitha Lane clutched her small valise tightly, her knuckles white with tension as she peered through the window at the ramshackle buildings that made up the frontier town. This wasn't Boston. This wasn't even close to the life she had imagined when she'd agreed to marry a man she'd never met. "End of the line, miss," the driver called as he opened the door, offering his hand to help her down. Tabitha took a deep breath, smoothed her travel-worn skirts, and stepped into the blistering heat. The journey had been long, nearly 3 weeks of train cars and stagecoaches, each leg taking her farther from civilization and deeper into a world she was increasingly certain she wasn't prepared for. "You must be Miss Lane," a gruff voice said. She turned to find a man in his late 20s standing a few paces away, his hat pulled low over his eyes to shield them from the sun. He wasn't what she expected. The letters from her intended Harold Whitcomb had described a prosperous cattle rancher with a fine home. The man before her wore simple, dust-covered clothes and had a weathered face that spoke of hard living. "I am," she replied hesitantly. "Are you Mr. Whitcomb?" The man shook his head. "Name's Noah Grayson. I work for Whitcomb Ranch. Harold asked me to fetch you since he's tied up with business in Sacramento." Disappointment washed over her. After traveling all this way, her fiancé couldn't even be bothered to meet her himself. It was one more sign that she'd made a terrible mistake. "I see," she said, trying to mask her feelings. "When will he return?" "Week or so," Noah replied, reaching for her luggage. "I'll take you to the ranch. It's about an hour's ride from town." As Noah secured her trunk to the back of a simple wagon, Tabitha gazed around at the town, a single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, a saloon with raucous laughter spilling from its doors even in the early afternoon, and not a proper lady in sight. She thought of the letter in her pocket, the one she'd written on the train as doubts had overwhelmed her. "Mr. Grayson," she said suddenly as he finished with her luggage, "is there somewhere in town I might stay for the night? I'm quite exhausted from my journey." Noah turned to her, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "There's a boarding house, but it ain't fancy. Ranch house is much more comfortable, even with Harold away." Tabitha hesitated, clutching her small handbag tightly. "I think I'd prefer to rest here tonight." Noah studied her for a long moment. "You're having second thoughts," he said. It wasn't a question. Her eyes widened. I don't know what you mean." "About marrying Harold," Noah said plainly. "I can see it in your face." Tabitha felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Was she so transparent? "It's just, this is all so different from what I expected." Noah sighed, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and kind eyes that surprised her. "Miss Lane, I've known Harold Whitcomb for 5 years. He's not a bad man, but he ain't what he claims in those letters either." Her heart sank. "What do you mean? The ranch is struggling. The house needs work. And Harold—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Harold has a fondness for gambling that's cost him plenty." Tabitha felt tears threatening to spill, her worst fears confirmed in an instant by this stranger. "Why are you telling me this?" Noah replaced his hat, squinting at the horizon. "Because if you've changed your mind, it's better to know now than after the wedding." "What would I do?" she whispered, suddenly feeling very small in this vast, unfamiliar land. "I've spent nearly everything I had on the journey here." Noah leaned against the wagon, considering her for a moment. "Then don't go through with it," he said simply. "There are other options." "Such as?" she asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "You could take a position in town. Mrs. Holbrook at the general store was just saying she needs help. Or there's teaching towns growing and they're looking to hire a school teacher come fall." Tabitha blinked in surprise. "You would help me?" Why? Noah's expression softened slightly. Because everyone deserves a choice, Miss Lane, even mail-order brides. For the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, Tabitha felt something other than dread, a small flicker of hope. Mr. Grayson, I believe I will take a room at the boarding house tonight. Noah nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. I'll help with your luggage, and while we're at it, you might want to think about what you'll say when Harold returns. As they walked toward the boarding house, Tabitha realized she just met the first person in Mojave who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare. It wasn't much, but in a town full of strangers, it felt like the beginning of something important. Mrs. Fletcher, the boarding house proprietor, was a round-faced woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked Tabitha up and down as Noah explained the situation, carefully omitting any mention of Tabitha's doubts about the wedding. Well, we don't get many unmarried ladies staying alone, Mrs. Fletcher said with a sniff. But I suppose it's proper enough if you're to be married soon. Rooms $2 a week, meals included. Tabitha nodded, mentally calculating how long her remaining funds would last. Thank you, that will be fine. As Noah carried her trunk upstairs to a small but clean room at the back of the house, Tabitha felt a strange mix of terror and relief. She was alone in a frontier town with no friends, little money, and a fiancé she was increasingly certain she couldn't marry. I'll be heading back to the ranch, Noah said as he set down her trunk. Harold will want to know you've arrived safely. What will you tell him? Tabitha asked anxiously. Noah considered her question. That you needed rest after your journey. It's the truth, at least part of it. Thank you, Mr. Grayson. He tipped his hat and turned to leave, then paused at the door. Sunday's the town social at the church. Might be a good way to meet some folks if you're staying. After he left, Tabitha sat on the edge of the narrow bed, looking around at the sparse room that was now her temporary home. She pulled out the letter she'd written, the one explaining to Harold that she couldn't go through with their arrangement. It seemed even more necessary now, but also more frightening. What would happen to her in this wild place if she rejected the only connection she had? The next morning, Tabitha rose early and dressed in her plainest day dress. If she was to find work, she needed to look practical rather than frivolous. The boarding house dining room was nearly empty when she came down for breakfast. Just a couple of traveling salesmen who tipped their hats politely before returning to their conversation about mining prospects. Mrs. Fletcher brought Tabitha a plate of eggs and biscuits. Settling in all right, dear? Yes, thank you, Tabitha replied. I was wondering if you might direct me to the general store. I understand they might be looking for help. Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. The Holbrook place. Yes, they are, but I thought you were here to marry Harold Whitcomb. Tabitha stirred her tea nervously. I'm considering my options. To her surprise, Mrs. Fletcher nodded knowingly. Smart girl. It's down the street, third building on the right. Sarah Holbrook's a fair employer. Worked there myself when I first came out west. The Holbrook General Store was already busy when Tabitha arrived. A bell jingled as she entered, and she found herself in a large room filled with everything from farm tools to fabric, canned goods to candy. A plump, middle-aged woman was measuring flour for a customer while a young man stocked shelves. Be right with you, the woman called. Once she'd finished with her customer, she turned to Tabitha with a friendly smile. Good morning. You must be new in town. I'm Sarah Holbrook. Tabitha Lane, she replied, extending her hand. I just arrived yesterday from Boston. Recognition dawned in Sarah's eyes. You're Harold Whitcomb's bride. What brings you to the store so soon? Shouldn't you be getting settled at the ranch? Tabitha took a deep breath. Actually, Mrs. Holbrook, I was told you might be looking for help in the store. I'm reconsidering my arrangement with Mr. Whitcomb. Sarah's expression changed from surprise to understanding. I see. Well, come on back to the office and we can talk. As they walked toward the rear of the store, the bell jingled again. Tabitha glanced back to see Noah Grayson entering, looking as surprised to see her as she was to see him. Mr. Grayson, she acknowledged with a nod. Miss Lane, he replied, touching the brim of his hat. Didn't expect to see you here. Tabitha's inquiring about a position, Sarah explained, giving Noah a meaningful look. Noah's expression was unreadable. That's so. Thought you might take a day or two to think things over. I don't have the luxury of time, Mr. Grayson, Tabitha replied quietly. Sarah looked between them with interest. Noah, I'll be with you in a few minutes. Just need to have a chat with Miss Lane here. In the small office at the back of the store, Sarah offered Tabitha a seat. Now, what skills do you have, dear? I can read and write well, Tabitha began. I kept accounts for my father's textile business in Boston. I'm good with figures and have elegant handwriting. Sarah nodded approvingly. That's useful. Can you operate a cash register? I'm sure I could learn quickly. What about your situation with Harold Whitcomb? Sarah asked bluntly. Not to pry, but this is a small town. If I hire you, there could be talk. Tabitha squared her shoulders. I came west believing Mr. Whitcomb's promises of a prosperous life. I've since learned those promises may have been exaggerated. Before committing myself in marriage, I'd like to establish some independence. Sarah studied her for a long moment. You've got spine, I'll give you that. The position pays $15 a month plus a room above the store if you want it. Hours are long 6 days a week from 7 until 6, half day on Saturdays. When could I start? Tomorrow morning, Sarah said. But what will you tell Harold? Tabitha had been pondering that very question all night. The truth, that I cannot marry him under false pretenses. He won't like that, Sarah warned. Men out here don't take kindly to having their pride wounded. Nevertheless, it must be done, Tabitha said firmly, though her heart raced at the thought when they returned to the main store. Noah was examining a new saddle displayed near the counter. He looked up as they approached, his eyes going straight to Tabitha's face. Mrs. Holbrook has kindly offered me a position, Tabitha told him. I'll be starting tomorrow. Noah nodded slowly. I see. And what about Harold? I plan to write to him today explaining my decision. Sarah busied herself with straightening items on the counter, clearly listening while trying to appear disinterested. A letter might not be the best way, Noah said carefully. Harold's got a temper. Might be better coming from someone who knows him. Are you offering Mr. Grayson? Tabitha asked, surprised. Noah shifted uncomfortably. I could. Explain that you've had a change of heart. Might go down easier coming from me. Why would you do that? Tabitha pressed. Because I've seen what happens when people get trapped in situations they don't want, he said simply. It rarely ends well. There was something in his voice, a hint of personal experience that made Tabitha wonder about Noah Grayson's own story. But before she could ask, the bell jingled again as more customers entered. Think about it, Noah said quietly. I'll be heading back to the ranch this afternoon. Throughout the day, Tabitha explored the town, familiarizing herself with its layout while considering Noah's offer. Mojave wasn't large, a main street with businesses, a few side streets with homes, a church, and a schoolhouse. Beyond the town limits sprawled ranches and farms that supplied the growing community. By late afternoon, she'd made her decision. She found Noah at the livery stable, preparing his horse for the ride back to Whitcomb Ranch. Mr. Grayson, she called as she approached. He turned, seemingly unsurprised to see her. Miss Lane, made up your mind, I have, she said. I would appreciate it if you would inform Mr. Whitcomb of my decision. Please tell him I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but I cannot proceed with our arrangement." Noah nodded, tightening his saddle cinch. "I'll tell him, but you should be prepared he might come to town to try to change your mind." The thought sent a chill through Tabitha. "Do you think he would force the issue?" "No," Noah said after considering. "Harold's proud, not violent. He'll be angry, maybe make a scene, but he won't hurt you." That was small comfort, but better than nothing. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Grayson. I don't know why you've been so kind to a stranger, but I'm grateful." Noah mounted his horse, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sometimes folks just need a chance to make their own way. I'll be back in town in a few days. If you need anything before then, talk to Sheriff Parker." As she watched him ride away, Tabitha felt a curious mix of gratitude and something else, something she wasn't ready to examine too closely. For now, she had a new job to prepare for and a new life to begin. The next morning, Tabitha arrived at the general store promptly at 6:30, dressed in her most practical skirt and shirtwaist. Sarah was already there, showing her the cash register and explaining how the store operated. "Most of our customers have accounts," Sarah explained. "You'll need to keep track of their purchases in these ledgers. At the end of each month, we send out statements." Tabitha nodded, already feeling comfortable with the familiar work of accounting. "My father had a similar system in his business." "Good. Now let's talk about inventory." By midday, Tabitha's head was swimming with information, but she felt confident she could handle the work. The store had been busy all morning with a steady stream of customers, many curious about the new girl from back east. "You're Harold Whitcomb's mail-order bride, ain't you?" asked a weathered farmer as Tabitha wrapped his purchase of nails. "I was," she replied carefully, "but I've decided to take a different path." The man chuckled. "Can't blame you there. Harold's got more debts than cattle these days." Word traveled fast in small towns, and by closing time, Tabitha had answered the same questions dozens of times. Most people seemed more curious than judgmental, though a few older women had given her disapproving looks. "You handled yourself well today," Sarah said as they closed up the store. Not everyone would have the courage to face down the town gossips on their first day. "Thank you," Tabitha replied. "I'm just trying to make the best of my situation." "Come on, I'll show you to your room," Sarah said, leading her to a narrow staircase at the back of the store. The room above the store was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table with one chair, and a window overlooking the main street. It was modest compared to her room in Boston, but it represented something priceless: independence. "It's perfect," Tabitha said sincerely. "Thank you, Mrs. Holbrook." "Sarah, please, and you're welcome. Breakfast is at 6 sharp at my house next door. Don't be late, my husband Thomas doesn't like to wait for his flapjacks." Left alone, Tabitha unpacked her few belongings and sat by the window, watching as the town settled into evening routines. Lamps were lit in windows, men gathered at the saloon, and families headed home from late errands. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a sense of possibility rather than dread. 3 days passed in a blur of activity as Tabitha learned the rhythms of the store and the town. She met countless residents, memorized prices, and started keeping the store's books in the evenings. Sarah was pleased with her work, and Tabitha found herself enjoying the independence of earning her own way. On the 4th day, just before noon, the store bell jingled and Noah Grayson walked in. He looked tired, with a day's worth of stubble on his face and dust covering his clothes. "Mr. Grayson," Tabitha said, surprised to see him. "Welcome back." "Miss Lane," he nodded, removing his hat. "Could I have a word?" Sarah, who was helping another customer, caught Tabitha's eye and nodded that she could step away. Tabitha led Noah to a quiet corner of the store. "How did Mr. Whitcomb take the news?" she asked, though she could guess from Noah's weary appearance. "About as well as expected," Noah replied grimly. "He'll be in town tomorrow. Said he wants to hear it from you directly." Tabitha's stomach tightened with anxiety. "I see. Thank you for the warning." Noah studied her face. "You all right? Found your footing here?" "Yes, surprisingly well," she admitted. "Mrs. Holbrook Sarah has been very kind and the work suits me." "Good," Noah said, seeming genuinely pleased. "Listen, when Harold comes tomorrow, would you like me to be there?" The offer surprised her. "That's very kind, but I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. You work for him, after all." Noah shrugged. "Not for much longer, likely. We had words after I told him about your decision." "Oh, Mr. Grayson, I never meant to cause trouble between you. It's been brewing a while," Noah said dismissively. "And it's Noah, please." "Noah," she repeated, feeling a strange flutter at using his given name. "Then you must call me Tabitha." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Tabitha." "So, would you like me there tomorrow?" She considered the offer. Having Noah present might make the confrontation with Harold easier, but it could also inflame the situation. "Perhaps nearby, but not directly involved unless necessary." "Sounds reasonable," he agreed. "He'll likely come by midday." "I'll make sure I'm in town." As Noah turned to leave, Tabitha impulsively touched his arm. "Thank you for everything." He looked at her hand on his sleeve, then met her eyes. "Just trying to do what's right." After he left, Sarah approached with a knowing look. "Noah Grayson's a good man," she said casually. "One of the best horsemen in the county, and honest as the day is long." "He's been very kind," Tabitha acknowledged, feeling her cheeks warm under Sarah's scrutiny. "Hum," Sarah hummed, not pressing further but clearly forming her own conclusions. That night, Tabitha found sleep elusive as she worried about the coming confrontation with Harold Whitcomb. She'd come to Mojave to marry him, had allowed him to pay for her passage west, and now she was breaking their agreement. No matter how justified her reasons, she couldn't help feeling she'd failed to honor her commitment. Morning came too quickly, and Tabitha dressed with special care, choosing her most conservative blue dress and pinning her hair neatly. Whatever happened, she wanted to face it with dignity. "You look like you're headed to a funeral," Sarah commented at breakfast. "I feel like I might be," Tabitha replied nervously. Thomas Holbrook, Sarah's quiet, steady husband, looked up from his newspaper. "Harold Whitcomb's all bluster," he said. "Stand your ground and he'll back down." "Besides," Sarah added, "half the town knows your situation by now. He won't risk making a scene." Tabitha wasn't so sure, but she appreciated their support. At the store, the morning passed in a haze of anticipation. Every time the bell jingled, she jumped, expecting to see Harold. But it wasn't until just after noon that the man himself finally appeared. Harold Whitcomb was not what Tabitha had expected from his letters, where he had described himself as distinguished and prosperous-looking. He was in fact a paunchy man in his 40s with thinning hair and expensive but worn clothing. His face was flushed with what might have been the heat or might have been drink. "So there you are," he said loudly as he entered, ignoring the other customers in the store. "My bride, working in a store instead of preparing for our wedding." Tabitha straightened her shoulders, aware of the curious eyes watching them. "Mr. Whitcomb, perhaps we could speak privately." "Why, ashamed to admit you've broken your promise," he demanded. "I paid good money to bring you out here." Sarah stepped forward. "Mr. Whitcomb, you can use my office if you'd like a private word with Miss Lane." Harold glared at her but followed as Sarah led them to the back office. Once the door closed, Tabitha faced him directly. "Mr. Whitcomb, I apologize for any inconvenience I've caused you. I will repay the cost of my passage as soon as I'm able, Harold snorted. It's not about the money, it's about my reputation. The whole county knows I sent for a bride, and now they'll know she rejected me. Tabitha held her ground. I cannot marry a man who misrepresented himself in our correspondence. You claim to have a prosperous ranch and a fine home. I have a ranch, and the house is adequate. According to multiple sources, your ranch is failing and you're deeply in debt, Tabitha said calmly. That's not what I agreed to. Harold's face darkened. So you'll just break our agreement based on rumors, without even seeing the place for yourself. Would seeing it change the fact that you misled me? Tabitha countered. Before Harold could respond, there was a knock at the door and Noah entered without waiting for an answer. Everything all right in here? He asked, his eyes fixed on Harold. You, Harold snarled. Should have known you'd be behind this. Always thought you were better than me, didn't you, Grayson? This isn't about me, Harold, Noah said evenly. Miss Lane has made her decision. Of course it's about you, Harold spat. Filling her head with lies about me so you could what? Court her yourself once she broke off with me. Tabitha felt her face flush with indignation. Mr. Whitcomb. Mr. Grayson has been nothing but a gentleman. He simply told me the truth that you concealed. Harold looked between them, his anger seeming to deflate as he realized the futility of his position. Fine, he said at last. Keep your job, Miss Lane, but remember you're the one who broke your word. With that, he pushed past Noah and stormed out of the office. Through the doorway, Tabitha could see him marching through the store and out the front door. Noah turned to Tabitha. Are you all right? She nodded, though her hands were trembling. Yes, it wasn't as bad as I feared. He's more hurt than angry, Noah observed. His pride, anyway. Thank you for coming in when you did, Tabitha said, though I think I had the situation under control. Noah's lips quirked in a small smile. You did. I just thought my presence might keep him from saying something he'd regret later. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Tabitha felt a connection that went beyond gratitude. There was something about Noah Grayson, a steadiness, an integrity that drew her to him. The moment was broken when Sarah poked her head in. Is the storm over? We've got customers waiting. It's over, Tabitha confirmed, smoothing her skirts. I should get back to work. As she returned to the counter, she felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Harold Whitcomb was now part of her past, not her future. By closing time, the confrontation with Harold had become the talk of the town. Several customers had made a point of stopping by just to see the brave Boston girl who stood up to Harold Whitcomb, as one elderly woman put it. You're quite the celebrity, Sarah teased as they closed up the store. I never wanted to be the subject of gossip, Tabitha sighed. It'll blow over, Sarah assured her. Next week, someone else will do something scandalous and you'll be old news. As they locked the front door, Tabitha noticed Noah waiting across the street, leaning against a hitching post with his hat tipped low. He straightened when he saw them. Evening, ladies, he called, crossing to meet them. Noah, Sarah greeted him warmly. Joining us for supper. Thomas always makes too much stew. Thank you, madam, but I've got some business to tend to, Noah replied. Actually, I was hoping to have a word with Miss Lane. Sarah's eyes twinkled with interest. Of course. I'll see you at the house, Tabitha. Take your time. As Sarah walked away, Tabitha turned to Noah curiously. Is something wrong? No, nothing wrong, he assured her. I wanted to let you know I've left Whitcomb Ranch, figured it was time to move on. Because of me? Tabitha asked, dismayed. Not entirely, Noah said. Been thinking about it for a while. Got an offer from the Carson spread north of town. Better pay, and old man Carson's looking to retire in a few years. Might be an opportunity to buy in eventually. That sounds promising, Tabitha said, genuinely pleased for him. But where will you stay in the meantime? Rented a room at the boarding house for now, Noah said. Which brings me to my question. I was wondering if you'd let me take you to the Sunday social this weekend. Tabitha blinked in surprise. Like a courtship. Noah's cheeks colored slightly above his beard. If that's agreeable to you, or just as friends if you prefer. Tabitha considered his offer. It had been less than a week since she'd arrived in Mojave intending to marry another man. Was she ready to consider a courtship so soon? Yet there was something about Noah that had drawn her from the first moment: his honesty, his kindness, his willingness to help a stranger at risk to himself. I think I would like that, she said softly. As the beginning of a courtship. Noah's smile transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree than she'd yet seen him. I'll call for you at 2 on Sunday then. I'll look forward to it. As Noah tipped his hat and walked away, Tabitha felt a flutter of excitement that had nothing to do with anxiety or uncertainty. For the first time since coming west, she was truly looking forward to what lay ahead. The Sunday social was held on the church grounds, with tables set up under the sparse shade of a few cottonwood trees. Nearly everyone in Mojave attended, dressed in their Sunday best. For Tabitha, it was her first real introduction to the community as herself, not as Harold Whitcomb's mail-order bride. Noah arrived at the Holbrook home promptly at 2, wearing a clean shirt and his best waistcoat. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard. The sight of him making such an effort for her brought a warm feeling to Tabitha's chest. "You look beautiful," he said when she opened the door, his eyes appreciative as he took in her pale yellow dress. "Thank you," she replied, feeling suddenly shy. "You look very handsome yourself." They walked to the church together, Noah careful to maintain a proper distance, but close enough that their hands occasionally brushed. Each accidental touch sent a small thrill through Tabitha. "I should warn you," Noah said as they approached the churchyard. "People will talk when they see us together." Tabitha smiled. "People are already talking. I might as well give them something worth talking about." Noah laughed, a rich sound that made her smile widen. "I like the way you think, Miss Lane." The social was in full swing when they arrived. Tables laden with food, children playing games, men discussing crops and cattle, women exchanging recipes and news. Noah introduced Tabitha to dozens of people, many of whom she recognized from the store but hadn't properly met. "So you're the gal who left Harold at the altar," said a tall rancher named James Carson, who Tabitha realized must be Noah's new employer. "We weren't quite at the altar yet," Tabitha corrected gently. "Smart move either way," James said with a wink. "And I see you found yourself a better prospect already." Noah cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Carson, Miss Lane and I are just getting acquainted." Of course," James said with a knowing grin. "You two enjoy the social. Noah, see you bright and early tomorrow." As the afternoon progressed, Tabitha found herself genuinely enjoying the company of the townsfolk. They were more open and direct than the people she'd known in Boston, but also more accepting of differences and mistakes. No one seemed to judge her harshly for breaking her arrangement with Harold. If anything, most seemed to respect her for it. "These are good people," she commented to Noah as they sat with plates of food under one of the cottonwoods. "Most of them," Noah agreed. "Frontier life weeds out the ones who can't work together or tolerate differences. Out here, you need your neighbors too much to hold grudges." "Is that why you came west?" Tabitha asked. For the sense of community, Noah considered her question. "Partly. Mostly I came for the open spaces, the chance to build something of my own. Back in Pennsylvania, everything was already established. No room for a man to make his own way unless he was born to it." "I understand that feeling," Tabitha said. In Boston, my options were limited to teaching, factory work, or marriage. Here, there seems to be more possibility. What did your family think about you coming west as a mail-order bride? Noah asked. Tabitha looked down at her plate. My parents died in a fire 2 years ago. The textile mill my father owned was heavily in debt. Once everything was settled, I had very little left. Noah's expression softened with understanding. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. What about your family? Mother died when I was young. Father was a blacksmith, taught me the trade, but he's gone now too. Got one sister back east, married with 4 children. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Reverend Walsh, the local minister, a kind-faced man in his 50s. Miss Lane, so lovely to have you join our community, he said warmly. Mrs. Walsh was just saying we should invite you to join the church choir. She says the general store has been much more pleasant since you arrived. Tabitha blushed at the praise. That's very kind of her. I do enjoy singing, though I don't know if I'm good enough for a choir. Nonsense, we take all comers, the Reverend assured her. Practice is Tuesday evenings. After he moved on, Noah grinned at her. Singing in the choir. You're becoming a proper Mojave citizen already. As the sun began to set, the social wound down. Families gathered their children and dishes, bidding farewell until the following Sunday. Noah offered Tabitha his arm for the walk back to the Holbrooks' home. I had a wonderful time, she told him as they strolled through the twilight. Thank you for asking me. I'm glad, Noah said. I was thinking if you're free next Saturday, maybe we could go for a ride. There's a nice spot about an hour from town waterfall that feeds into a small lake. Good place for a picnic. That sounds lovely, Tabitha replied. Though I should warn you, I'm not much of a horsewoman. Don't worry, I'll find you a gentle mount. When they reached the Holbrooks' porch, they paused, neither quite ready to say good night. In the distance, the last colors of sunset painted the desert in golds and purples. I've been thinking, Noah said finally, about what you said regarding your passage west, about repaying Harold. Tabitha nodded. I meant it. I don't like being in debt to anyone, especially him. I respect that, but I was wondering if you'd let me help. I've got some savings. That's very generous, but I couldn't accept, Tabitha said firmly. I'll manage on my own. Noah smiled. I thought you might say that. Just know the offer stands if you change your mind. Their eyes met in the fading light, and Tabitha felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. Impulsively, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Good night, Noah. His eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pleasure. Good night, Tabitha. The weeks that followed took on a pattern that gave Tabitha a sense of belonging she hadn't felt since before her parents' death. Weekdays were spent at the general store, learning the business and getting to know the townspeople. Evenings often included dinner with the Holbrooks, occasionally joined by Noah when his work at the Carson Ranch allowed. Tuesdays meant choir practice, where Tabitha discovered she had a better voice than she'd realized and made friends with several women her age. Saturdays became special, as Noah would take her exploring the areas around Mojave, the waterfall he'd mentioned, an old abandoned mission, a ridge that offered views all the way to the distant mountains. On these outings, they talked endlessly, learning each other's histories, dreams, and beliefs. Noah, she discovered, had left Pennsylvania at 19 after his father's death, working his way west as a blacksmith's assistant, then a cattle driver, and finally a ranch hand. He dreamed of having his own small ranch someday, breeding horses rather than cattle. Horses are smarter, he explained as they sat by the waterfall one Saturday in late July. Each one has its own personality. With cattle, you're just moving a herd. With horses, you're building relationships. Tabitha shared her own dreams too, how she'd always loved books and learning, how she'd once hoped to attend college before her parents' deaths made that impossible. "There's talk of starting a proper library here," she told Noah. "Sarah says the town council has been discussing it for years but never quite gets around to it." "You should be the one to organize it," Noah suggested. "You've got the education and the interest." "Me?" Tabitha laughed. "I've only been here a month." "Sometimes it takes a newcomer to see what a town needs," Noah pointed out. "And you've already won over half of Mojave with your work at the store." As July turned to August, Tabitha realized something remarkable had happened. Mojave had become home. She no longer compared everything to Boston or felt like an outsider. She knew the shopkeepers, the farmers' wives, the children who came to the store for penny candy. And at the center of this new life was Noah, whose steady presence and unwavering support had become essential to her happiness. One evening in mid-August, Noah invited her to dinner at the hotel restaurant, a step up from their usual meals at the Holbrooks. He seemed nervous as he escorted her to a table set with the hotel's best linens and china. "This is lovely," Tabitha said, admiring the effort someone had made to create an elegant setting in the Frontier Hotel. "Wanted tonight to be special," Noah replied, his usual confidence seemingly diminished. They ordered the hotel's specialty steak with potatoes and seasonal vegetables and talked about their week. But Tabitha could tell Noah had something on his mind. He kept touching his vest pocket and glancing around as if checking that everything was in order. "Noah," she said finally, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "What's troubling you?" He took a deep breath. "Not troubling, just important." He withdrew a small box from his vest pocket. "Tabitha, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything." Tabitha's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. Noah opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Tabitha's eyes. When she'd come to Mojave to marry Harold Whitcomb, marriage had been a practical arrangement, a means of survival. But this was entirely different. This was about love, respect, and a shared vision of the future. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Noah, I would be honored to be your wife." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "I know it's not fancy," he began. "It's perfect," she interrupted. "Absolutely perfect." Across the restaurant, Tabitha suddenly noticed several familiar faces watching them: Sarah and Thomas Holbrook, Reverend and Mrs. Walsh, even Sheriff Parker and his wife. All wore knowing smiles. "Did everyone know about this?" she asked, laughing through her tears. Noah looked sheepish. "Might have mentioned my plans to a few people. Word gets around." "I'm beginning to understand how small towns work," Tabitha said, squeezing his hand. After dinner, they walked through town under a canopy of stars. Several people called out congratulations as they passed, news of their engagement already spreading. "I was thinking," Noah said as they strolled, "James Carson has offered me the foreman's position starting next month. Comes with the use of a small house on the property." "That's wonderful news," Tabitha exclaimed. "You deserve it. It's not much of a home yet, just 2 rooms and basic furnishings, but it could be a good start for us, unless you'd prefer to stay in town." Tabitha considered the question. "I've grown to love Mojave, but I think I'd like living on the ranch. It would be our own place, and I could still come to town regularly." "That's what I was hoping you'd say," Noah admitted. "I've already started fixing it up: new roof, fresh paint. By the time we're married, it should be comfortable enough." "When were you thinking for the wedding?" Tabitha asked, suddenly realizing they hadn't discussed timing. "Well," Noah said slowly, "I know these things usually take months to arrange, but I was hoping that is, if you're willing, maybe October, before the winter weather sets in." "October sounds perfect," Tabitha agreed. "Nothing too elaborate, just our friends and a celebration afterward." Noah stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Are you sure? You deserve a proper wedding with all the trimmings." Tabitha shook her head, smiling up at him in the starlight. "What I deserve is a good man who loves me for who I am. I found that in you, Noah. The rest is just details." He leaned down to kiss her, a gentle, reverent kiss that promised a lifetime of love and respect. As they continued their walk, making plans for their future together, Tabitha marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few short months. She had come to Mojave resigned to a marriage of convenience, only to find the courage to choose a different path, a path that had led her to real love, community, and a sense of purpose. The mail-order bride had indeed changed her mind, and in doing so had found her heart. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. By day, Tabitha continued her work at the general store, though Sarah had already begun training a new assistant to take over some of her duties after the wedding. Evenings and weekends were filled with preparations, sewing her wedding dress with help from the church ladies, helping Noah finish repairs on their future home, and planning a modest but festive wedding celebration. Noah had been true to his word about the house on the Carson Ranch. Though small, it was sturdily built, with a cozy main room that served as both kitchen and living area, plus a bedroom with actual glass windows, a luxury in the frontier town. Noah had added his own touches: handcrafted shelves for Tabitha's books, a rocking chair on the small front porch, and a flower garden started from cuttings donated by the women of Mojave. "It's not what you were used to in Boston," he said apologetically, when he first showed her the completed renovations. "It's better," Tabitha assured him, imagining winter evenings by the fireplace and summer mornings watching the sunrise from the porch. "It's ours." One surprise came in late September, when a letter arrived for Tabitha at the general store. The return address showed it was from Harold Whitcomb, now living in Sacramento. Tabitha opened it with trepidation, unsure what Harold might have to say after their last encounter. Inside was a brief note and a bank draft for the exact amount he had paid for her passage west. "Miss Lane," the note read, "I've had time to reflect on our situation and recognize that my anger was misplaced. You were right to hold me accountable for my misrepresentations. Please accept this reimbursement of your travel expenses with no further obligation. I wish you well in your new life. Respectfully, Harold Whitcomb." "Well, I'll be," Sarah said when Tabitha showed her the letter. "Seems Harold found his conscience after all." Tabitha felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had been saving diligently from her earnings to repay Harold, but it would have taken months more to accumulate the full amount. Now she could enter her marriage to Noah free of that obligation. "What will you do with the money?" Sarah asked. Tabitha considered. "I think I'll buy Noah a wedding gift, something meaningful for our new home." That afternoon, while Noah was busy at the Carson Ranch, Tabitha visited Mr. Peterson, the furniture maker. She commissioned a bookcase made of local wood, designed to match the shelves Noah had already built. It would be her contribution to their shared home, a place for knowledge and stories, for building their future together. October arrived with perfect weather, warm days and cool nights, the desert blooming with late wildflowers. The wedding was set for the third Saturday of the month, with Reverend Walsh officiating at the church. The night before the wedding, the women of Mojave hosted a small party for Tabitha at the Holbrook home, bringing gifts and advice for the bride-to-be. The men, meanwhile, gathered at the saloon to celebrate with Noah in the traditional way. "Are you nervous, dear, Mrs.?" Walsh asked as the women enjoyed tea and cake in the Holbrook's parlor. "A little," Tabitha admitted. "Not about marrying Noah. I've never been more certain of anything, but standing in front of the whole town tomorrow." "You'll only see Noah," Sarah assured her. "Trust me, I don't remember a single face from my wedding day except Thomas's." "And remember," added Mrs. Carson, James's wife, "marriage is a partnership. There'll be hard times along with the good. The secret is facing them together." Tabitha nodded, grateful for the wisdom of these women who had welcomed her into their community. When she'd arrived in Mojave, she'd felt utterly alone. Now, surrounded by friends who had become like family, she knew she would never be alone again. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Tabitha woke early in her room above the store, watching the sunrise paint the desert in gold and rose. Today, she would become Mrs. Noah Grayson. The thought filled her with quiet joy. Sarah arrived to help her dress first the new corset and petticoats, then the wedding dress itself. Made of cream-colored silk ordered specially from San Francisco, the dress was simpler than what she might have worn in Boston but perfect for a frontier wedding. Soft lace adorned the modest neckline and cuffs, while tiny pearl buttons marched up the back. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, her eyes misting as she arranged Tabitha's dark hair in an elegant updo, crowned with a circlet of desert wildflowers. "I feel beautiful," Tabitha replied, hardly recognizing the radiant young woman in the small mirror. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Thomas Holbrook, who had offered to escort Tabitha to the church in place of her father. "The carriage is ready whenever you are," he said, his usually gruff voice gentle with emotion. "And if I may say so, Miss Lane, you're going to take that young man's breath away." The church was filled to capacity when they arrived, the entire town having turned out for the occasion. As Thomas helped her from the carriage, Tabitha could hear the organ playing inside Mrs. Walsh at the keys, no doubt. "Ready?" Thomas asked, offering his arm. Tabitha took a deep breath. "Ready." The church doors opened and every head turned as Tabitha appeared on Thomas's arm. But she saw only Noah, standing at the altar, his eyes fixed on her with such love and pride that her heart seemed to expand in her chest. He was handsome in his new suit, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved except for his well-trimmed beard. But it was the look in his eyes that moved her, a look that said she was the most precious thing in his world. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Tabitha remembered exchanging vows, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened. She remembered the warm weight of the gold band Noah slipped onto her finger, a match to the engagement ring she already wore. And she remembered, with perfect clarity, the moment Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, and Noah leaned down to kiss her, a kiss that sealed their promises and began their life together. "Mrs. Grayson," Noah whispered as they turned to face the congregation, his voice filled with wonder. "Mr. Grayson," she replied, squeezing his hand as they walked back down the aisle together, into the bright October sunshine and the cheers of their friends. The celebration afterward was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with food contributed by every household in Mojave. There was music, fiddles and harmonicas played by local musicians, and dancing that continued well into the evening. As the sun began to set, Noah led Tabitha away from the festivities toward a waiting buggy decorated with ribbons and flowers. "Time to take my wife home," he announced to cheers and good-natured teasing from the guests. They rode through the twilight toward the Carson Ranch, the road familiar now to Tabitha after her many visits to their future home. But tonight was different. Tonight, she would not be returning to her room above the store. Tonight, she would sleep beside her husband in their own home. Happy? Noah asked as they approached the small house, its windows glowing with lamplight. Someone had gone ahead to prepare for their arrival. Completely, Tabitha replied, leaning against his shoulder. I never imagined I could be this happy. Noah helped her down from the buggy and surprised her by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Inside, they found the house transformed. Fresh flowers on the table, a fire burning in the hearth, and on the mantel, the bookcase Tabitha had commissioned, already filled with their combined collection of books. Your wedding gift arrived yesterday, she explained as Noah examined the finely crafted piece. Do you like it? It's perfect, he said, running his hand along the polished wood, but not as perfect as my gift from you. What gift? Tabitha asked, confused. Noah took her hands in his. You, Tabitha Grayson, you're the greatest gift I could have received. When you stepped off that stagecoach, I had no idea you would change my life so completely. And you changed mine, she replied softly. I came here expecting a marriage of convenience, afraid of my future. Instead, I found a man I could truly love, and a place I could call home. That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Tabitha reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought her to this moment. If she hadn't found the courage to change her mind about marrying Harold Whitcomb, if Noah hadn't been the one to meet her stagecoach, if he hadn't spoken those simple, life-changing words, then don't go through with it, how different her life would be now. What are you thinking about? Noah asked, his voice drowsy with contentment. How fortunate I am, Tabitha replied, nestling closer to him. And how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you've made a mistake and change course. I'm glad you changed course into my life, Noah murmured, his arms tightening around her. As she drifted toward sleep, Tabitha felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, in this small house, in this remote desert town, in the arms of this good man who had seen her worth from the beginning. The mail-order bride had changed her mind, and in doing so, had found her heart's true destination. Spring 1876 brought new beginnings to the Grayson household. Tabitha's garden flourished under her care, bright with wildflowers and herbs that perfumed the air around their small home. Inside, another kind of growth was taking place, a gentle rounding of Tabitha's belly that promised a late summer addition to their family. You think it's a boy or a girl? Noah asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. I have a feeling it's a boy, Tabitha replied, her hand resting protectively over the small bump. Strong and steady like his father, Noah's hand covered hers, his touch gentle. As long as the baby is healthy and you're well, that's all that matters to me. Life on the Carson ranch had settled into a pleasant routine. Noah's position as foreman kept him busy from dawn until dusk most days, but he always made time for Tabitha. Their evenings were spent reading aloud from their growing collection of books, planning for the baby's arrival, or simply talking about the day's events. Tabitha had reduced her hours at the general store once her pregnancy was confirmed, but she still rode into town twice a week to help with the bookkeeping and to maintain her connections with the community she'd come to love. The rest of her time was divided between caring for their home and pursuing a new passion, organizing Mojave's first lending library. The town council had finally approved the project in January, allocating a small room attached to the schoolhouse for the purpose. Tabitha had taken charge with characteristic determination, soliciting book donations, creating a catalog system, and establishing lending policies. The library opens next week, she told Noah excitedly as they prepared for bed one night in April. "We already have over 100 volumes, everything from Shakespeare to practical farming guides." Noah smiled at her enthusiasm. "You've given this town something valuable, you know. Most children here wouldn't have access to books otherwise." Tabitha nodded thoughtfully. "That's what drives me. I remember how books opened the world to me when I was young. Every child deserves that chance." As spring turned to summer, the desert heat intensified and Tabitha's pregnancy advanced. By July, she had reluctantly given up her trips to town, finding the journey too taxing in her condition. But Mojave came to her instead. Sarah Holbrook with baskets of fresh baked goods, Mrs. Walsh with handmade baby clothes, and a steady stream of ranch wives offering advice and company. "You've become the heart of this community," Noah observed one evening as they watched yet another visitor depart. "Everyone wants to be part of our baby's life. It's remarkable," Tabitha agreed. "When I first arrived, I felt so alone. Now I can't imagine a more supportive extended family." August brought stifling heat and increasing discomfort for Tabitha. Dr. Wilson, Mojave's physician, visited weekly, assuring them that everything was progressing normally despite the challenging weather. "First babies often take their time," he told them during a particularly hot afternoon visit. "But this little one should make an appearance before September, I'd wager." The doctor proved right. On the last day of August, as a rare summer storm brought relief from the heat, Tabitha's labor began. Noah sent one of the ranch hands racing for Dr. Wilson and Mrs. Carson, then returned to Tabitha's side, his face a mixture of excitement and fear. "I'm here," he promised, holding her hand as the contractions intensified. "I won't leave you." The labor lasted through the night, with Mrs. Carson and later Dr. Wilson guiding Tabitha through the ordeal. Noah remained steadfast, speaking words of encouragement, wiping her brow, and bearing the crushing grip of her hand without complaint. Just as dawn broke over the eastern mountains, their son was born, a robust baby with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the world with impressive volume. "He's perfect," Noah whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as Dr. Wilson placed the swaddled infant in Tabitha's arms. "Hello, William," Tabitha murmured to their son, using the name they had chosen to honor Noah's father. "Welcome to the world." In the days that followed, their small home was transformed by the presence of the new life they had created. William, or Will, as they quickly began calling him, was a good-natured baby who seemed to regard the world with the same steady curiosity as his father. "He has your eyes," Tabitha told Noah as they watched their son sleep in the cradle Noah had crafted with his own hands. "And your determination," Noah replied, smiling as Will's tiny fist clutched his finger with surprising strength. Autumn brought cooler temperatures and new developments. James Carson, impressed by Noah's management of the ranch, offered him a partnership, a small ownership stake with the promise of more in the future. "It's what I've been working toward," Noah told Tabitha as they discussed the offer one evening. "A chance to build something that could be ours someday, maybe even Will's after us." "I think you should accept," Tabitha said without hesitation. "You've earned this opportunity and it's a secure future for our family." The partnership became official in October, coinciding with their first wedding anniversary. To celebrate both occasions, they hosted a small gathering at their home, the Carsons, the Holbrooks, Reverend and Mrs. Walsh, and a few other close friends who had supported them throughout their journey. As twilight fell and their guests departed, Noah and Tabitha stood on their porch, Will sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. The desert stretched before them, vast and beautiful in the fading light, a landscape that had once seemed alien to Tabitha, but now represented home. A year ago today, we stood before Reverend Walsh and promised to build a life together, Noah said, his arm around Tabitha's shoulders. Did you imagine then what that life would look like? Tabitha looked up at him, her heart full. I hoped it would be like this, full of love and purpose. But the reality is even better than I dreamed. And to think, Noah mused, it all started because a mail-order bride changed her mind. And because a kind cowboy said, then don't go through with it, Tabitha added with a smile. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they stood together, husband, wife, and child, a family forged not from obligation or necessity, but from choice and love. The path had been unexpected, but it had led them exactly where they were meant to be. 5 years later, the small house on the Carson Ranch had been expanded to accommodate the growing Grayson family. Will, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's love of books, had been joined by a 3-year-old sister, Emma, whose spirited nature kept the household lively. Noah's partnership with James Carson had flourished, with Noah now owning a quarter share in the ranch. Under their combined management, the operation had expanded, becoming one of the most successful in the county. Noah had realized his dream of breeding horses alongside the cattle business, developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that were sought after throughout the territory. Tabitha, too, had seen her ambitions bear fruit. The Mojave Lending Library had outgrown its original space and now occupied its own small building on Main Street, staffed by volunteers and open 3 days a week. Additionally, she had begun teaching reading classes for adults in the evenings, mostly ranch hands and miners eager to improve their prospects. Mrs. Grayson, a grizzled miner named Pete, had told her after mastering basic reading, "You've given me back my dignity. Now I can write to my family back east without asking someone else to put down my words." Such moments reinforced Tabitha's belief in the power of education and community values she and Noah were instilling in their children. Life wasn't without challenges. The harsh desert environment sometimes tested their resilience with drought, dust storms, or sudden flash floods. The isolated nature of ranch life meant long periods without the company of others beyond their immediate family and the ranch hands. And the work itself was demanding, requiring dawn to dusk effort from Noah and careful management of household resources from Tabitha. But these challenges served to strengthen their partnership rather than weaken it. Each difficulty faced together deepened their appreciation for the good times and for each other. On a crisp autumn day in 1881, Noah returned from town with unexpected news. Harold Whitcomb was there, he told Tabitha as they sat on their expanded porch after the children were in bed. "First time I've seen him since before our wedding." Tabitha looked up from her mending in surprise. "Harold, what brought him back to Mojave? Says he's passing through on his way to San Francisco. He's got a shipping business now, seems to be doing well." Noah paused, watching her reaction carefully. "He asked about you. What did you tell him?" Tabitha asked, curious rather than concerned. "The truth. That you're happy that we have 2 beautiful children, that you've made a real difference in this town with the library and your teaching." Noah reached for her hand. He seemed genuinely glad to hear it. Tabitha squeezed his hand, reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. "I hope he's found happiness too, if I had gone through with marrying him." "But you didn't," Noah reminded her gently. "You made a different choice." "The best choice I ever made," Tabitha said with conviction. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, the sounds of the desert night surrounding them, coyotes calling in the distance, The rustle of wind through the garden Tabitha had nurtured to lush productivity. They shared a moment of profound gratitude for the life they had built. Inside their home, their children slept peacefully. On the walls hung photographs and mementos of their years together: their wedding portrait, Will's first drawing, a pressed flower from Emma's birthday, the deed showing Noah's partnership in the ranch. "You ever miss Boston?" Noah asked, a question he hadn't posed in years. Tabitha considered it honestly. "I miss certain things: the libraries, the theaters, the changing seasons. But no, I don't miss the life I had there. This is where I belong." Noah nodded, understanding completely. He had once asked her on that first day when she'd stepped off the stagecoach looking lost and uncertain to consider her options. He could never have imagined then that she would choose him, choose this life they now shared. "I love you, Tabitha Grayson," he said simply. "And I love you, Noah Grayson," she replied, the words as true now as the first time she had spoken them. As the stars appeared in the vast desert sky, they sat together in companionable silence. Two people who had found in each other not just love, but partnership, respect, and a shared vision of what mattered most in life. The mail-order bride who had changed her mind and the cowboy who had encouraged her courage had created something remarkable together: a family, a home, and a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. And in that quiet moment, as the desert wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of tomorrow, they knew with absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be.